In September 2007, a game was released, a legendary one, which gave regular people the chance to do incredible things, whether it was connecting with some of the most famous people in history, intercepting an art heist, or encountering Bigfoot himself. Only one platform granted access to such an opportunity, and that platform was called Poptropica. Now stalled in development as a result of Adobe Flashpoint's infamous shutdown, the game Poptropica gave these opportunities and more to anyone who can access an account and solve puzzles or look up tutorials on the internet. I want to help preserve and enhance the legacy of this glorious game, primarily only accessible through a platform called Flashpoint, and hopefully soon a project I will mention at the end of this video. I hope for its restoration someday, accompanied by the release of new features in the game. I also hope that this platform attracts a new generation of players while retaining the original ones. This being said, welcome to my channel, where I, White Rock / Crazy Gamer / whatever other name Flashpoint bestows upon me, tell you things about and analyze your favorite, least favorite, or soon to be favorite or least favorite locations throughout Poptropica, known as islands. This first episode will broadly focus on Early Poptropica Island. Whereas Poptropica's oldest inhabitants have a problem, someone's been stealing their stuff. To return what's rightfully theirs, you'll explore creepy sewers, pitch black caverns, and even a giant's garden in the clouds. First, Early Poptropica Island is the only island to have 2 multiplayer locations. For those of you who may be confused, Poptropica is mostly a single-player virtual world game. However, certain locations within each island were accessible to multiple players to interact with each other. These multiplayer locations, known as common rooms, still possessed strict bubble chat options, where players could only exchange pre-filled phrases with each other. This may make the game sound lame, but it seems to be part of Poptropica's genius because the player is instead given a lot of non-player characters or NPCs to learn from, steal clothes from, and interact with more than they could with other people in the game, and possibly other virtual world games. This made the game less reliant on a fickle player base and instead reliant on their own development and incorporation of details, which are flawlessly done. The 2 common rooms featured are a soda shop and an arcade, and players never needed to access common rooms to complete their quest. However, the common rooms did have some references, or at the very least tied into the theme of the island. They also had different navigation controls than the rest of the island, and sometimes allowed players to chat about certain parts of the island they were on. In this case, the soda pop shop references the style of American restaurants in the 1980s, with the checkerboard motif and neon signage, and Poptropica is an American game. Meanwhile, the arcade is significant to the 1980s in accordance with this next factoid. Number 2. Poptropica was established in 2007, but Early Poptropica was established back in 1982, although one of the more recent islands, Goofball Island, expands this timeline to circa 647. Not 1647, 647. That's an old game. Many sources such as Wikipedia.org, Poptropica Wiki, and the Strong National Museum of Play cite 1982 as one of the most significant years in video game history, as this year hosted the release of second-generation consoles like the Intex Adventure Vision, allowing gamers to play some of the world's first adventure games, which featured pixelated characters like the early Poptropicans, whose unique art style references that iconically employed by these consoles. The Poptropica Help blog states that the early Poptropicans attire references the pilgrims who came to the United States of America, which makes sense considering Poptropica's status as an American game whose creator resides in Massachusetts, where the American pilgrims first settled. Number 3. Early Poptropica Island references Jack and the Beanstalk, most notably through the purple giant. One may also notice the castle in the background and the vine that the players climb to access this portion, as this vine resembles what I would think a beanstalk would look like. Additionally, in a sewer, the player is tasked with exploring and a golden egg is collected. The egg is an item in the traditional rendition of Jack and the Beanstalk, stolen by the titular character, which he uses to become rich, or in the player's case, earn even more gold upon the completion of the island. Once you pass through the Giant's Club, you can see a garden, and a garden is a popular location in traditional renditions of Jack and the Beanstalk. For example, Jack owns a garden, or in this case, the garden is located behind the Giant's house. This reference is not surprising considering the creator of Poptropica, Jeff Kinney, and his well-known adoration for books. Number 4. There is a Poptropican that kinda looks like a wizard, and he has a cart of balloons labeled pigments. If the player clicks on a balloon attached to the cart, their skin color changes. This is located on the bottom leftmost scene of the island. This cart refreshes every time you leave that part of the island and then return, which is an increasingly uncommon feature as newer islands are released on Poptropica. Number 5. The flag the player retrieves appears to withhold some type of crest with 4 charges, or heraldic symbols. There does not seem to be any meaning behind these symbols, but the colors red, yellow, and green are employed, interestingly excluding Poptropica's signature blue. The yellow on the crest could represent Poptropica's employment of the color, with the circle in the top left possibly representing the game's signature yellow blimp, which according to the Poptropica help blog did not even exist at the time of Early Poptropica Island's release. Bridget Watson Payne, author of The Wonder of Colors, not sponsored, references yellow as a color that generally evokes happiness or positive feelings, which fairy tales like Jack and the Beanstalk could do, and Poptropica's adventures now do for millions of people. It is possible that the yellow line and 3-pixel marking in the bottom right of the shield represent the familiar tower accompanied by a cloud. As for the red, Payne attributes this color to power and danger, 2 themes of the island and Poptropica as a whole, between the early Poptropicans' power over the game as some of the oldest Poptropicans in it, and presumably the most powerful, and the power of the player to seemingly pause or resume events on the island as they wish. This ties back to my previous statements about the lack of interaction with other players, which are replaced by a heavy amount of interaction with advanced NPCs. This structure allows the individual player a lot of power, typically unseen in popular virtual worlds. This power could be attributed to the red symbols in the top right of the flag, which appears to be a line in another line with a pixel poking out, possibly referencing the structure of the sewer system the player travels through. The other red symbol seems to reference a wave of sorts, which could be water or maybe a cloud. I like to think it represents water because Poptropica takes place on an island and the creation of this symbol precedes other islands. Yes, early Poptropica was the only island available at one point. But this could allude to the player's future acquisition of autonomy to move between islands, therefore exercising their power in more advanced situations. It's interesting that this flag is placed right next to the sea, which the player navigates through with their blimp using the map. Payne also attributes red to the number 1, which I find to be a fun coincidence as early Poptropica was, again, the first island of the game. Lastly, the flag showcases a green backdrop. Payne attributes green to growth, and possibly another instance of Poptropica foreshadowing the growth of the game through more islands. This idea of growth is mirrored by the notable amount of plant life visible in the island, through the giant's garden, recurring beanstalk, and the tropical vegetation present on the part of the island which withholds common rooms. Number 6. Now, onto one of my favorite parts of Poptropica, the Pop Art Museum. I was surprised to see such a thing present in Poptropica's very first island. I could not find any information to officially confirm this, but I think of Poptropica as a sort of living, playable comic book, a form of artwork if you will, because it is centered on adventures, some of which have multiple parts, and the chat bubbles along with the cutscenes have such distinct designs, mirroring the cartoonish style of comic books. Also, some islands are based on books, which makes this even more probable, and historical figures are often incorporated, which is another common feature for comic books. I mean, every island is like an animated story you can interact with that I would totally read if it were on paper. But the placement of the Pop Art Museum in early Poptropica shows that Poptropica possesses an intrinsic appreciation for visual artwork, especially with their implementation of famous artists within the museum in their first island ever nonetheless. The interesting thing about this museum is that it is called the Pop Art Museum, but this name is misleading as the museum does not feature any artwork from the pop art movement. This disappointed 7-year-old me who just learned about Andy Warhol. It is most likely called the Pop Art Museum to reference the game's title first 3 letters instead of the actual arts movement. especially as it was fairly recent and a lot of the famous works from the pop art movement are copyrighted, such as those by Andy Warhol. Number 7. If you click on the button right of the paintings on Early Poptropica, it will take you to a site called Fact Monster, and it is still up to date, nearly 20 years later. This website sources information from reliable sources like Columbia University's encyclopedia to give fun historical facts to users. You can also play games and even see historical events that happened on your birthday. The placement of this website in Early Poptropica showcases Poptropica's intentional foundation on education all around. Early Poptropica had a lot in it, and little did its first players know, it would be followed by 50 plus other islands. Poptropica is playable on coolmathgames.com today, not sponsored, but this version unfortunately excludes Early Poptropica along with a majority of Poptropica's islands. Similarly, Flashpoint offers players access to islands but still excludes some, or some don't even work. And I'll see you next time to discuss Sharktooth Island.